On the morning of December 5th, 1872, the crew of a British merchant ship spotted something unusual on the horizon. A brigantine was drifting aimlessly across the Atlantic Ocean. Its sails were still raised. It wasn't signaling for help. It wasn't changing course. It simply wandered across the waves as if no one was steering it. Captain David Morehouse watched through his spyglass with growing concern. At first, he assumed the crew must be struggling with damaged rigging or poor weather. But as the mysterious vessel drew closer, something felt deeply wrong. No one appeared on deck. No one answered their signals. There wasn't a single visible soul aboard. Morehouse ordered a boarding party. What they discovered would become one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history. The ship was called Mary Celeste. Its cargo was still safely stored below deck. The crew's personal belongings remained untouched. Food and fresh water were plentiful. The captain's cabin looked almost normal, yet every person on board had vanished. The captain, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and 7 experienced sailors. 10 people had disappeared without leaving behind a single body. No signs of violence, no signs of piracy, no obvious explanation. More than 150 years later, no one knows for certain what happened aboard the Mary Celeste. This is the story of the world's most famous ghost ship. Long before the Mary Celeste became a legend, it was simply another hard-working merchant ship. Ironically, it wasn't even built under that famous name. In 1861, a shipyard on Spencer's Island in Nova Scotia launched a new brigantine called Amazon. She measured just over 100 feet long and was designed to carry cargo across the Atlantic. Almost immediately, strange misfortunes began to follow the ship. Her first captain died unexpectedly only weeks after taking command. Over the following years, Amazon was involved in several accidents. She collided with another vessel. She suffered repeated damage during storms. At one point, she even ran aground. None of these incidents were supernatural. Merchant ships faced dangers constantly during the 19th century, but later storytellers would point to this string of bad luck as the beginning of a curse. Eventually, after years of financial troubles and changing owners, the damaged vessel was sold. American businessman Richard Haynes purchased the ship, extensively rebuilt it, and gave it a new name, Mary Celeste. Fresh paint, new equipment, a new beginning, or so everyone believed. By 1872, Mary Celeste had become a respectable merchant vessel once again. She wasn't luxurious, she wasn't famous. She was simply another cargo ship crossing one of the busiest oceans in the world. Then Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs entered the story. Briggs was exactly the kind of captain ship owners hoped to hire. He was highly experienced, deeply religious, known for his honesty, and respected by nearly everyone who had worked with him. Friends described him as calm, disciplined, and careful. He wasn't known for taking unnecessary risks. He had spent most of his life at sea and had safely completed voyage after voyage. If anyone could be trusted with a difficult Atlantic crossing, it was Benjamin Briggs. But this journey would be different from all the others. Briggs made an unusual decision. Instead of leaving his family behind, he invited them to sail with him. His wife, Sarah, agreed to join the voyage. Their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, came as well. Their young son stayed behind with relatives so he could continue attending school. For Sarah and little Sophia, the voyage was supposed to be an adventure. A few months at sea, then Italy, then home again. None of them could have imagined they would never return. The rest of the crew seemed equally dependable. The first mate, Albert Richardson, had years of sailing experience. The second mate, Andrew Gilling, had an excellent reputation. The steward and the remaining sailors were carefully selected. There were no known troublemakers, no criminals, no inexperienced recruits. In fact, historians have often pointed out that this was one of the more reliable crews assembled for a merchant voyage during that era. Nothing about the people aboard suggested disaster was waiting. On November 7, 1872, Mary Celeste departed New York Harbor. Her destination was Genoa, Italy. Deep inside the cargo hold sat 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol. Today that might sound dangerous. In reality, shipments like this were fairly common. The alcohol wasn't intended for drinking. It would be used for industrial purposes after arriving in Europe. The cargo itself was valuable, worth tens of thousands of dollars in today's money, enough to matter, but not enough to tempt an experienced captain into reckless behavior. Just 8 days later, another merchant ship left New York. Its name was Dei Gratia. Its captain was David Morehouse. Even more interesting, Morehouse and Benjamin Briggs knew each other personally. The two captains had dined together before leaving port. Some accounts even suggest they discussed their upcoming Atlantic crossings over dinner. Neither man had any reason to believe their ships would meet again. Yet fate had other plans. The Atlantic crossing was never easy. Autumn storms frequently swept across the ocean. Powerful winds could push ships hundreds of miles off course. Navigation depended on clear skies, accurate instruments, and constant observation. A single mistake could have serious consequences. Still, nothing during the early days of Mary Celeste's voyage seemed particularly alarming. Captain Briggs continued writing regular entries in his logbook. The crew carried out their daily routines. The weather changed as expected. Everything appeared normal. The final confirmed log entry was dated November 25th. According to the ship's records, Mary Celeste was approaching the Azores, a chain of volcanic islands in the middle of the Atlantic. The crew had nearly completed the most difficult portion of the crossing. Italy was still far away, but the voyage seemed to be progressing successfully. Then, the record ends. No distress message, no final warning, no desperate request for help. The pages simply stop. Whatever happened next occurred in complete silence. For 10 days, no one knew anything was wrong. The Atlantic is vast. Thousands of square miles of open water can hide almost anything. A ship disappearing from sight wasn't unusual, but on December 5th, everything changed. About 400 nautical miles east of the Azores, Captain David Morehouse noticed a strange vessel drifting erratically through the waves. From a distance, he immediately recognized something wasn't right. The ship's movements made no sense. It wasn't following the wind correctly. Its sails hung awkwardly. Sometimes it turned into the wind, sometimes away from it, almost as if no human hands were controlling the helm. Morehouse ordered his crew to move closer. As the distance narrowed, his concern grew. He recognized the ship. It was Mary Celeste, the very ship that had left New York only days before his own. He raised his signal flags. No response. He fired a signal. Still nothing. The deck remained eerily empty. Finally, Morehouse made the decision every captain dreaded. He ordered several men to board the drifting vessel. None of them knew they were about to step into one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. The boarding party climbed onto the Mary Celeste expecting to find injured sailors, or perhaps a crew hiding below deck. Instead, they found silence. The ship wasn't abandoned in the way people imagine ghost ships today. It wasn't covered in seaweed. It wasn't falling apart. It looked as though the crew had simply stepped away. The sails were damaged but still usable. The rigging had suffered wear from days without proper handling, yet the vessel remained seaworthy. There was water inside the hull, about 3.5 feet, but that wasn't unusual for a wooden merchant ship crossing the Atlantic. Experienced captains had encountered far worse without abandoning their vessels. The cargo remained neatly stacked below deck. Every one of the 1,701 barrels appeared to be in place. Nothing suggested looting. Nothing suggested panic. The crew's clothing was still inside their cabins. Personal belongings remained untouched. Money and valuables had been left behind. The captain's sword still hung where it belonged. In the galley, food supplies were plentiful. Fresh drinking water remained on board. There was enough to keep the crew alive for weeks. If pirates had attacked, why leave everything behind? If mutiny had occurred, where were the signs of a struggle? If a violent storm had struck, Why was the ship still afloat? The deeper the boarding party searched, the stranger the mystery became. Then they noticed what was missing. The ship's only lifeboat had disappeared. So had several essential navigation instruments, including the sextant and marine chronometer. Without them, accurate navigation across the Atlantic would have been nearly impossible. It looked as if someone had intentionally taken those items before leaving the ship. But why? Even stranger, the ship's official logbook stopped 10 days earlier. There was no final entry explaining an emergency, no farewell, no warning, nothing. It was as though time itself had suddenly stopped aboard the Mary Celeste. Captain David Morehouse now faced an extraordinary situation. Under maritime law, an abandoned vessel could be claimed as salvage. If he successfully brought the Mary Celeste into port, both he and his crew could receive a substantial reward. But claiming another captain's ship was never simple. It meant answering uncomfortable questions. How had a perfectly good vessel become abandoned? Had there been foul play? Could the rescuers themselves somehow be involved? With no better option, Morehouse placed a small prize crew aboard the Mary Celeste. The two ships sailed together toward Gibraltar. News spread quickly. When they finally arrived, newspapers were fascinated. A ship had crossed hundreds of miles of open ocean with no one at the helm. Its passengers had vanished, and no bodies had ever been found. The authorities immediately opened an investigation. The man leading it was Frederick Solly Flood, Gibraltar's Attorney General. Flood had a reputation for suspicion. He wasn't satisfied with simple explanations. Almost immediately, he began to suspect fraud. Perhaps Captain Briggs had staged the disappearance. Perhaps the cargo had been secretly transferred. Perhaps Captain Morehouse and the crew of the Dei Gratia had murdered everyone aboard and invented the entire story to collect salvage money. It was a sensational theory. There was just one problem. The evidence refused to cooperate. Investigators carefully examined the ship. No bloodstains, no signs of sword fighting, no bullet holes, no hidden treasure. The cargo was counted. Almost every barrel remained exactly where it should have been. Flood even believed he had found mysterious cuts on the captain's sword. Experts later concluded they were ordinary corrosion. Again and again, dramatic theories collapsed under scrutiny. Eventually, after months of investigation, no one could prove any crime had taken place. The salvage reward was granted, although it was much smaller than Captain Morehouse had expected. Officially, the mystery remained unsolved, and that is exactly where speculation began. Over the next century and a half, countless explanations would be proposed. Some were surprisingly reasonable. Others belonged more in science fiction than history. Today, most historians believe the leading explanation begins with the cargo itself. Remember those 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol? Interestingly, not all of them were made from the same material. 9 barrels were constructed from red oak instead of white oak. Red oak is slightly more porous. Over time, alcohol vapors could slowly escape. That detail may have changed everything. Imagine standing inside the cargo hold. You can't see the vapor. You can't smell much over the scent already filling the ship, but invisible fumes are building beneath the deck. Captain Briggs has transported dangerous cargo before. He knows alcohol vapor is highly flammable. If enough gas accumulates, a single spark could trigger a devastating explosion. Modern experiments have demonstrated something interesting. Under certain conditions, alcohol vapor can produce a sudden pressure blast without leaving obvious burn marks. To the people on board, it might sound like an explosion was about to happen. Briggs didn't need to know whether the danger was real. He only needed to believe it might be. If he feared the cargo was about to explode, abandoning the ship temporarily could have seemed like the safest decision. Historians think he may have ordered everyone into the lifeboat while keeping it attached to the Mary Celeste with a long rope. The plan would have been simple. Wait a safe distance away, see whether the ship exploded, then climb back aboard. It's a sensible plan until something goes wrong. A sudden gust, a rough wave, a frayed rope snapping under tension. Within moments, the lifeboat drifts away. The Mary Celeste, still under partial sail, slowly catches the wind. Without anyone aboard to adjust the sails or stop the ship, it begins pulling farther and farther ahead. The people in the lifeboat watch helplessly. Every minute increases the distance. The Atlantic is enormous. Without sails, they cannot catch up. Eventually, the ship disappears beyond the horizon. The crew is left alone in a small open boat. No one ever sees them again. This explanation fits many of the known facts. The missing lifeboat, the missing navigation instruments, the untouched cargo, the lack of violence, the seaworthy condition of the vessel. It also explains why Captain Briggs, an experienced and cautious sailor, might willingly abandon his own ship. Of course, it remains only a theory. Other researchers have suggested a rogue wave may have convinced the captain the ship was taking on dangerous amounts of water. Some believe a faulty-sounding rod caused Briggs to overestimate flooding inside the hull. Others argue navigation errors near the Azores may have made him think land was much closer than it actually was. There are also the more sensational ideas: pirates, mutiny, sea monsters, even alien abductions. But nearly all of these theories suffer from the same problem. They require evidence that simply doesn't exist. Pirates don't usually leave valuable cargo untouched. Mutineers rarely disappear without a trace. Sea monsters belong in legends, not historical investigations. Yet despite more than 150 years of research, one unsettling fact remains. No definitive answer has ever been proven. Perhaps that's why the Mary Celeste continues to capture our imagination. It isn't merely a story about a missing crew. It's a story about uncertainty, about the uncomfortable realization that even in an age of maps, science, and navigation, people could still vanish into the open ocean without leaving behind a single clear explanation. The Atlantic eventually gave back the ship. It never gave back the people. Today, the name Mary Celeste has become almost synonymous with the phrase ghost ship. Its story has inspired novels, documentaries, films, television shows, and countless works of fiction. Ironically, many details people think they know were never true. In 1884, author Arthur Conan Doyle, years before creating Sherlock Holmes, published a fictional story inspired by the case. He changed names, invented dramatic events, and added murders that never happened. The story became so popular that many readers assumed it was historical fact. Over time, fiction blended with reality. The legend grew larger than the evidence, and perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. Not simply what happened aboard the Mary Celeste, but why a single abandoned ship has continued to haunt human imagination for more than a century and a half. Somewhere beyond the horizon, 10 lives simply disappeared from history. The ocean kept their secret, and it has never given it back.